On today's episode, we have Derek Antti, SDR team lead at Talend.
Get ready to learn how you can best leverage your SDR to AE relationship through building trust, taking excellent notes, and bring the energy. Your success is our success, so let's get started.
From the heart of Silicon Valley in beautiful San Francisco, California, welcome to the SDR Live podcast with Marcos and Andy.
Welcome back to another episode of the SDR Live. Today we have Derek Antti. Derek, welcome to the show.
Thank you, gentlemen. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, of course. Super excited. I mean, your flow is on point today on the hair, and so that means we're going to have a great episode. But today is really all about trying to figure out how to establish the SDR and AE relationship. But before we start, what I want to do is get a better understanding of your current role. I know you're absolutely crushing it. And then if you can share a little bit more about how the team is situated, and we'll go from there.
No, yeah. So thanks for passing the ball over to me. So my role is I'm an SDR team lead. I started off as an SDR straight out of SV Academy. At Talend, we had a chance to do an internship through the SV Academy program. And with that, I was able to land an intro role as an SDR. And at about the 1 year mark, I took on the role as SDR team lead. So now I manage a team of 4 SDRs. And we cover the Central Territory. So I'm the one guy that sits out of the West Coast here in California, whereas the rest of my team's all out of Minnesota. So it was a challenge for sure at first, to kind of, they went from being just my peers and people that I worked with on a day-to-day basis to kind of being more of their manager. But I think it helps that I'm in the player coach role, right? To be able to really do the day-to-day stuff so that I can give them like really valuable feedback. And now with the current state of the world, we're all virtual, right? So that really, I think we had an advantage in the sense of that we were very used to that being kind of in a dispersed workforce. So, we didn't really skip a beat when COVID-19 hit. We were pretty much used to the way we communicated and got together and just kind of carried that momentum through the quarter here.
That's funny that you mentioned that you're the only one, started off in San Francisco, but are overseeing Central, because I was very similar to that. And it's kind of like interesting, right? And I'm just curious, like, as far as like the states that you cover, and then also like your quota, what is that as far as like meetings and opportunities?
Yeah, so I cover specifically just the state of Illinois, and I have a much lower quota, given that I'm in kind of the player coach role. So typically I'm asked to bring in 2 qualified opportunities a month, which is very, very low. I would say on average, SDRs at Talend pool in about anywhere from 6 to 10 per month. And that's like very well vetted opportunities. It's not just meetings. So like, I think that's a thing we do differently, maybe, where you're not just setting up a call and that's what you're compensated on. It really needs to be qualified by sales and accepted by sales, before we can get them. So yeah, I cover, Illinois. I've covered all different kinds of central states. I've worked with, actually, since I started, I just looked at this data the other day. I worked with over 10 AEs, a mix of AEs and CSRs, which is more of like an inside closing role here at Talend. I think that's what helped to propel me into the role I'm in now, right? I kind of became the jack of all trades, could work with anyone, could pick up if someone got promoted or left or whatever it may be, try to hop in on that team and bring the momentum right away. So that's why I think this topic is something that I was really passionate about, just because I've gone through those experiences with so many different people, that it kind of led me to where I'm at, right? And to be able to talk about it a little bit in more depth.
It's definitely going to scale, especially for the audience. And just one last question before we get into the meat and potatoes, which everyone's here for. But I'm just curious about the best quarter you've ever had as far as a quota attainment perspective. Was that 100%? What was that?
And it could be like your team attainment as well, since I know now you're a team lead, you're mainly focusing on team goals, et cetera.
Yeah, so as an individual contributor last year, I think my best quarter was 100 and 18%. Maybe I'm missing that by maybe a percent or two. But I finished the year at over 100%, and was able to get President's Club in my first year. So that was like shocking for sure. And it came down to the wire, you know what I mean? Like Q4 is always crazy to try to make sure that you secure that. And unfortunately, you know, our President's Club is canceled for the year so I got it my first year, but because of COVID-19, but they put together a nice package for us, and it was still definitely very worth it. But one of the things I want to touch on, I think the most important quarter so far has been the quarter that we just finished, in the sense of that, you know, we're going through a global pandemic right now, right? And to be able to, you know, myself personally reach 100% of my quota for this quarter is crazy, you know? And it's like something that I think internally we were all kind of marching to the same drum of, you know, let's get through this and be that team that, you know, is on top of everything and not using this as an excuse to be successful. And so, you know, we had some people that were very heavily affected by it. You know, we have some people that cover like sled accounts and stuff like that, where it's really, really difficult. But as a team, you know, as a team as a whole, not even just my team specifically, the whole entire SDR org, you know, collectively, we were over 100% of our number. So it was just really, really good momentum for our company, and just, you know, the culture and everything in general, kind of marching to the beat of the same drum as we head through kind of these challenging times.
I love that you said that, because like this, we are in an economic recession, and this COVID quarter right now, to compete, to really perform and outperform other people, you need to be like the top of your game. You need to be constantly doing the best things that you can do. So like even the small things, like for our topic today, the SDR to AE relationship, like these are the things that will get you like to your goal, cross the goal, and become that top performer. So I'm super excited.
Yeah, and just one
100%.
thing, I wrote one word down, which is consistency. There's nothing better than a consistent SDR to over-attain on quota. So that's what you are, and that's the reason why you're the team lead. So I'm super excited. I know Andy is. I know the audience is. Let's get into the meat and potatoes.
All righty. So let's dive in. The first kind of topic that I put together for this was establishing communication norms. So just to kind of recap everything that we just talked about, you know, we're going to be talking about the SDR AE relationship, something that I've had a lot of experience with. Like I mentioned, over 10 AEs that I've worked with over the course of my 2 years here. So it's just something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. And as a team lead, I think you experience this a lot, right? Where you have someone that's new, you get used to their team. And so I'm doing a lot of coaching on how to overcome any of the obstacles they might be facing, how to get ahead of some of those questions that you might get later on around, you know, like, why can I get on this guy's good side, or how come she's, you know, reaching out to me and in this tone, or whatever it may be. And so I spend a lot of time up front to kind of set the tone as far as what we do as SDRs. And how to kind of be that energy. You'll hear me talk about that a lot through this. That's like my mantra, is really to be the energy as an SDR, but it all starts with establishing communication and knowing kind of where your boundaries are that you've set with your AE. So we'll dive right in here. So over here on the left hand, feel free to jump in to both of you whenever you guys have some questions. But my first tip is to start early. So, I mean, as early as day one, when you find out, and this could be, you know, you're getting a new account executive on your team, or it could be that you're new to the company. In either situation, I think it's really important to do this little trick that I'm going to talk about here. And so what you'll see on the right is an example of kind of just my introductory email that I'll send to someone when they're getting started, or if I'm getting started. And really, it's just to, you know, be proactive, right? Like, you know that you're either for day one on the job, or it's their day one on the job, right? Either scenario. And I think one of you two needs to set the precedence of, you know, hey, like, we're in this together. This is a partnership, right? And I'm excited to be your partner. And so I'll lead off with something like this, which is an email. And what I'm looking for is a reply with their direct contact information, just like we would with any prospect, right? And so I think the best thing you can do is to treat your AE like a prospect, not like a stakeholder, right? I think they are a stakeholder for your success, and setting the tone early to show them that you can do this with your with your AE is something that you're going to be able to do with their customers and their prospects. And so that's pick up the phone, give them a call, right? And I think it's important to just maybe even call them out of the blue, just like you would a cold call, and just start the conversation. Start with a warm introduction, ask them how their day is going. But really, it sets that tone that you're not scared to pick up the phone and call someone, right? And it puts a level of trust in your AE that this guy or gal really knows how to get started in that way, right? So I'll pause there for a second if you guys have some questions around that little tip that I shared.
I mean, it just brings a big smile to my face because you're like cold calling your AE. Like, who taught you that? Was that yourself, or was that, did you just want to make a good first impression, or how did that go?
So this wasn't anything I read on LinkedIn or like anything you read in a sales book. It's more, I think, just like psychology, I guess. And I'm no psychology expert, but I think that I just thought, if I put myself in their shoes, I'm looking for an SDR that is willing to pick up the phone and call me and have a conversation, right? Just like I'm going to expect them to do to my customers and my prospects. And it gives you an opportunity to build that trust of just, showing what you sound like over the phone, how you show up to a call, the type of energy you can bring to that call. And, are you smiling on the other end, or are you super serious, or do you sound like, you're nervous? Those things matter, right? And I think it just sets the tone early. And I just thought, after I was going through a lot of these transitions, I would kind of wait in the beginning to be like, oh, like, they're my AE, they're like a little more superior to me, like maybe they'll reach out or set some time. But then I realized that it set the tone a lot differently when I started to do it this way. And I was the one that engaged, and I was the one that kind of was the proactive one, and brought the energy. So really, really fun trick to try with people as you're getting started, or if you have a new AE that you're just getting started to work with.
I love that you said that, just because to give a little more context, like depending on the different companies that you're in, you might be assigned 3 AEs or 3 new AEs at the end of each, or at the beginning of a new quarter. And that AE might have 3 to 4 SDRs that they're assigned to every quarter. So like you have to really show your AE, why does he have to invest time on you, like over the other SDRs that he's assigned to? And you have to know these AEs have been in your role have been an SDR, have been knows the inside and the outside of the product. So like he will be kind of your guidance counselor, whatever you want, your mentor to like the road to success, as well as a lot of information that you need to know. So like this not only sets the tone early, but also makes him believe in you and trust the relationship. So I love it.
That's great. And then this metrics part, what is that all about?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that a lot of SDRs don't establish early is what their metrics even are, right? And I think from an AE's perspective, like you're thinking about your metrics and the number that you have over your head and what you're trying to get to. And there's 2 things here. I think we don't communicate enough about how we get paid and what the business is expecting of us. And so, and also, what does that mean, right? So a lot of us have some type of like an SAL or some kind of meeting metric, and it needs to be qualified to a certain degree. And a lot of the times I see SDRs that didn't set that standard or that boundary early, then they're going back and having that conversation after the fact of, hey, this one should have been a meeting, and I'm 1 meeting away from hitting my number for the quarter. So can you help me out here? You know what I mean? And it's like, well, this could have been solved a long time ago, right? If I just knew that this met the criteria or whatever it is that you're looking to achieve. So sharing that early, like I wouldn't say maybe in this first phone call, but setting some time after that first phone call to have some kind of a formal one-on-one where you can just, it's just like sharing, like success criteria with a prospect, right? And getting on the same page in that way. I think we need, again, to treat them like a stakeholder, right? And let them know what success means to us. And then also the second degree to that is knowing what their metrics are. and how your metrics align. So I can say, Marcos, if you're my AE and you have to pull in $500,000 this quarter, how many meetings does that mean I need to bring you, right? So like you might have a quota and a number, and hopefully that aligns well to your SDRs and your AEs. But at the end of the day, just having that for goal setting purposes and for rapport building and to be like, oh, I've gotten the 10 meetings this month, like we're almost to your number. That all helps with the progress of building that relationship in the long term. And so I think it's just one of the most important things that a lot of us think about once we're in the scenario where it's too late almost, right? Or you continue to just kind of go with the flow a little too much, rather than just setting it up front, getting it out of the way. And now we're both on the same page and we can both move forward successfully, right?
Yeah, it's like setting expectations right away and just making sure everyone's aligned. I wouldn't tell you how many times, like, I think early on when I started, I didn't share like my quota, but I thought they knew it. But at the end of the day, like the AE since I'm an AE now, like I don't know what my SDR or BDRs, like their quota is, and maybe shame on me, but I got to focus on, closing business instead of like coming up with opportunities. But if I have some good trust with an SDR, of course, I'm going to like give them an opportunity every once in a while to help them make quota. But I think something that's really interesting too is like this example that you shared. I mean, you're even sharing with the audience, like defined examples on how they should go out and outreach. So maybe we can go over that because I think that's so valuable.
Yeah. So it's short and sweet, right? I think that it kind of goes back to just like, everything about these messages all goes back to treating your AE like a stakeholder, right? It's a message that's short and sweet and to the point, and it kind of leaves you on a hanger here. So the part that I'll kind of touch on the most is the last sentence there. If time allows, I'll try to give you a ring to say hello. And I actually use this in prospecting a lot because then it shows. I actually saw on when I started doing this, I saw on LinkedIn that someone said for a cold calling tip to start off with, I don't have much time. I don't know if you guys have seen that. But what it does is it's kind of like a psychological thing of, hey, like this is an important call, but like my time is just as valuable as yours is in a way. And I think as SDRs, sometimes we give that away too much, right? Because we're so desperate to get a meeting and we're so desperate to get on someone's calendar. But in reverse, it means a lot to the prospect to hear that, or it just kind of changes the way you think about the call, right? It's not the same old, hey, how you doing, Andy? Nice to meet you. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, Andy, don't have much time, but I just want to take 2 minutes from you. You know what I mean? And that just sets a different tone right away, right? It sounds like you know what you're calling for. You know what you want to talk about. You're not there to waste anybody's time. And so back to this example, it's like, hey, not only are you, when we talk about on here on the left, the learning communication preferences, you're starting to get a little bit of that started with, hey, in the meantime, I'm always a text or an email away. So that it's like, hey, that's the best way to reach me, right? Text me or email me. But if time allows, I'll try to get you over the phone. And then later on, you need to start reinforcing what that communication preference looks like. So are they a texter? Are they an emailer? Are they someone that you can Slack? Are they someone that just wants you to pick up the phone and call them? And really, my suggestion is to get to that point where you're comfortable picking up the phone and calling someone, so long as that's what their communication preference is, right? If it's not, then you could cause problems. But if it is, and I would say in sales in general, we're used to being on the phone a lot, so most people are very open to that. But at least you can get that real time feedback when you need it, or when you just got off the phone with a prospect and they're like, hey, I need to get, like, this is ASAP, let's get together tomorrow. It's not like I'm sending Marcos an email and hoping that you get back to me in 2 days. Like, this is, pressing. But it also helps to build that rapport, right? I can just pick up the phone and call you, and there's no lag time, and we're moving and we're getting stuff done, right? Again, be the energy. I think that's one of the most important things. So the next thing, and we kind of touched a little bit on this, but it's continuing the momentum. So this is actually a good transition. So like, what do you do after you've had that initial call, you set up that one-on-one and you're trying to understand still kind of how you're going to communicate in more of a weekly or biweekly basis. And so I personally prefer weekly one-on-ones. I think the earlier in the week, the better. Although I think Fridays are still pretty good days just because it seems to be very free for most people. But the reason why earlier in the week is usually better is because then you're real time talking about what you're doing for the week, right? And usually we know there's like webinars or events or all different kinds of stuff that are time sensitive, to where the earlier in the week you meet, the more likely you are to really put together strategies in place. Whereas if you wait to the end of the week, you have the whole weekend to forget about it, right? And then you might be scrambling 1 or 2 days before. Maybe you got to call them in one extra time when really you could have just solved that by having, kind of like a stand-up meeting at the beginning of the week. So that's kind of my take on the weekly one-on-one and why I think it's so important. And I'll pause there for a second in case you guys have questions. If not, we'll head over to the example here that we have for the one-on-one agenda.
Yeah, I could shed some light here too, as far as what I used to do. So I started off doing weekly one-on-ones, and I think they're good, but sometimes I think they're a time sink. So I'm just curious, like, on your thoughts, maybe. And it looks like you have an example agenda, but is there a way like you structure a one-on-one so like you go in and like you hit everything that you want to hit, and then like you might have time? Because a lot of people are like, hey, I have 3 AEs. Why am I going to spend 30 minutes with each AE? And that's just going to waste time for me prospecting, right?
Right. So I think it depends on a couple different things. It depends on how your organization is structured. So like at Talend specifically, we handle both inbound and outbound roles. So it's like really important to know what you're doing that's creating inbound traffic, right? So whereas if you have a split, it might not mean that much if, something comes back in inbound, if you're an outbound rep or whatever it may be, right? So with us, I think it, in our specific situation, it makes a lot of sense to have that constant communication because you're always talking about something, right? And this is an example of what we've put together actually as a team. This isn't created by just me. This is created by our team here to kind of give you a building block as to what you should be talking about. And so what I do is I put this in the meeting invite so that we both see it every week, right? And then along with that, I have what I call a living document where I have like a Google online spreadsheet where I'm kind of tracking like our accounts, what's going on with them, what are our action items for the week? Again, being the energy, right? And so it's always there. Every time when we go to click on that Zoom link and get together, it's a constant reminder that, hey, this isn't just a chance for us to just get together and say how you doing and talk about things that don't really matter. And I think there's a place for that too. That helps to build the relationship too. But at least you have this in your vision to where you can say, okay, based on these criteria that we have here, maybe there's something that's really important to cover. And maybe there's a couple of these things that we spend less time on this week because they're not as important, right? But at least you have that template and that guideline. And I think the AE needs that too, because they're probably, in some cases meeting with multiple SDRs, or they're, or vice versa, right? You're meeting with multiple AEs. So it helps to just give some type of template for you to go over. But I think the most important thing to cover is reviewing opportunities. And that's where I'm kind of talking about in these next 2 points here, in terms of you need to have that learning experience as to why or why not things are progressing, right? And we're always sitting there at the end of the month saying, man, I really think this one should have been a meeting, or like whatever it may be that your metric. But if you didn't talk about it, it gets stagnant, right? Maybe the prospect ghosted you, right? And if it would have gotten talked about earlier,
Yep.
You could have solved that earlier, right? And so I think this is something that a lot of people don't do, is like, hey, what happened in this one to where, I can learn from that like, did I not ask the right qualification questions up front, or is there something that I should have asked earlier before I set that meeting with you? Or what did I do right in this one, right? Like, what did I ask for that was right? Or what was that a good prospect? Like, was that a good title that we never really talked to that title before? Like, how is it progressing now? Because sometimes we don't have, as SDRs, have insight deeper into the sales cycle, right? And so it's a good habit to create, to ask the feedback, not only on how you're doing as an SDR, but I think getting, that alignment as far as, what criteria makes me paid, right? What gets me paid? And what is it, the criteria that you're looking for? Because at the end of the day, we can have, a detailed definition of what a qualified opportunity is, but it really comes down to the people, right? And I think the people are going to feel they're more confident in something or less confident in something. And a lot of people worry too much about the definition rather than really understanding the counterpart, that, like, their stakeholder, right? And understanding what makes Marcos tick. What do you like to hear, right? What do you want the prospect to be telling you to have confidence in the opportunity? And also really just what makes a valuable opportunity in general, right, for your business too.
Yeah, I kind of love the structure that you put in place, especially this idea of reviewing opportunities, what worked and what didn't. I feel like a lot of times, some people might have that AE that just accepts every freaking opportunity, right? And you're just like, this is amazing. But sometimes you'll have an AE that just won't accept anything, right? And they're very strict.
Yep.
And so I think you might talk about this maybe more as far as like how the SDR really needs to sell with the AE, right? It's like a team sport.
Yeah. So I have a slide on that, and I could probably progress here if you guys, with your permission, to talk about pipeline development as a team sport. So this is what it's all about, right? The team sport aspect is something that I see as the number one red flag to groups that don't have success together, is that they don't treat it like a team sport. It's very segmented. AEs doing their own thing, SDRs doing their own thing. Sometimes that collides and you get a meeting out of it and everything's good. But a lot of the times it doesn't. And because you're not marching to the beat of the same drum, you know what I mean? In terms of getting to that goal together, understanding what, Marcos, your coaching could help me to ask better questions, and I could help you to, provide better notes or listen to calls in a certain way, to listen for cues and things that you might not pick up on because you're presenting, or whatever it may be, that helps to progress things forward. And so with the help of my good friend Jim Oyen at Talend, he's on our enablement team. Him and I are both very passionate about this topic. He came to me about this whole SDR AE relationship topic at one of our sales kickoffs about a year ago. And that's kind of what sparked this whole topic when we got together to say, like, hey, this is a good one to talk about. And these were examples that he brought from talking to some of the account executives about this topic. And so both of these folks here, Kareem and Steve, I worked with Steve personally, one of my favorite AEs, one of the top performers in Talend as a whole. But and he has a lot to do with the way that I go about my relationships with my AEs now. But it kind of goes to what we were talking about earlier. If my SDR is working with multiple AEs, I want to be their favorite AE. You know what I mean? And so and that doesn't mean that Kareem just flips opportunities, whatever is thrown at him. I think he has a very high standard, but I think he invests a lot of time into building the relationship to where it's an organic approach, right? The SDR is going to know what he wants, and he's going to make it known, and he's going to show you tips and tricks on how to be better and better yourself. And then with Steve, the faster my SDRs are up to speed, the more they'll help my business. And I lived that with Steve firsthand. He was, the very first time I met him, he said, "What's your pitch?" And then we continue to work on pitch practicing and my pitch is still, to this day is crafting, like, because he taught me how to pitch to your prospect, right? So like Talend's a very extensive product. It's really, really hard to pitch because we cover so many different things, right? And so when we work together, he would kind of progressively help me to pitch just it in general, and then pitch it to this persona, and then pitch it to this industry, and then pitch it to this group or whatever it may be, or pitch this product specifically. And that helped me to attack prospects individually and have that personal touch, because people think that there's one generic pitch that fits everything, and that's wrong. It does not work that way. You need to look at the LinkedIn. You need to look at anything you can do to make some type of connection. And so to his point there, it helped me to ramp very quickly because he invested that time in my learning. And that's where the team sport started, right? And so once we kind of got the momentum building, then it was like, you know, our one-on-ones became a little bit less structured because he had trusted me, and he knew I kind of knew what I was doing, right? And so we found at Talend that there was AEs that are more communicative with their SDRs, create a more active and successful SDR. And then there's a direct correlation between highly active SDRs and SDRs who achieve their goals and have the highest ACV booked. So proof is in the pudding. The more that you're on kind of that alignment, right, with your AE, and the more that you're constantly communicating with them, from what we see at Talend specifically, this could be different at other companies, but we're seeing that those groups are much more successful at the end of the day.
I love that you said that, and that we're just speaking about this topic. And like to add a little bit of color, a lot of people come into the SDR role and think that, oh, my AE, they write my checks because they have to accept my opportunities. So they're like technically my second boss. And it's very easy to give into that thinking because, like, honestly, everyone did it in the beginning. But what you really have to realize, like, not only is it a team sport, it's a mutualistic relationship because you're feeding him pipeline. He's accepting, he's writing your checks, like you're helping each other out. And once you establish that relationship, like you said, reviewing opportunities and sharing learnings, this is how you can get to the next step faster. He has so much to share. He or she has so much to share. There wins the deal strategy. If you want to become an AE, that's exactly who you need to want as a mentor. So brilliant.
Moving on here to the next topic, and you've heard me say it like 10 times already in this, so hopefully it sticks, but it's be the energy. I actually came across a post on Instagram, and I'll share it for you guys if you guys want to put it in the comments or the description below. But really, this gentleman named Tom, he's kind of a motivational speaker, and he talks about his first experience being in kind of like a business call, right, as he was like interning. And he says that the power is in saying goodbye, right? Because he would bring all of the energy up into the call just to get a seat in the table, right? Like he was so excited to just have a seat at the table that once he was there, he's taking the notes. He's at, Marco, you said Tuesday at 5. Like, okay, Tuesday at 5, I'm writing that down. Andy, you said, I need you to send you a webinar link or whatever it is. Okay, I got that down, right? And so what that does is takes pressure off my AE and allows them to focus and listen during the call rather than, and that's why we have two people, right? Like if there wasn't a need for both of you on the call, then you wouldn't be there, right? So if you're in the call, you're taking the notes, you're bringing the energy, and you're just excited to say goodbye at the end of the call, right? Because that might be all that you contributed. And hopefully that's not it, right? Hopefully you can bring some good ideas and ask some good questions, but at the very base level, he talks about how excited he was to just say goodbye because he knew that he was bringing all these pieces that were going to allow his team to be successful. And he was just so happy to have a seat at the table and learn from the people that were around him. So that was like a mantra that I took very personal because I felt that same energy to always bring value, right, to whatever it is that I'm doing, whether it's with my prospects or whether it's internally with my AEs. And so like, here's my little my little slide here on always bring value. And it's important, right? I think that, like, if you just think about that in everything that you do, when you pick up the phone and make a call, you know, are you just calling just to call, or are you calling to bring value? When you're writing the email, are you just doing it just to get it done with, you know, or are you really trying to go and take that next step and look at the LinkedIn and try to get the personalized touch in there? And when you meet with your AE, you know, are you bringing some valuable insights about their business, right? Like if you're talking about those one-on-ones that might be a little bit more stale, I think there's an opportunity to bring more value, right? There's always something to bring to the table. And I think it's about time management and really asking yourself, how do I bring value to whatever it is that I'm doing? And that's going to help you to be an even better SDR, but a better partner for your AE, 100% through and through. If you just ask yourself that one question. So we'll dive into my first tip of bringing the energy, and that's taking excellent notes.
Yes. I love notes, by the way.
So I'm a big notes guy too. And it's funny because one of my counterparts, when I first started, he told me, you know, Derek, if you want to get promoted into a closing role, one of the things they're going to look at is your notes. And I always was like a really good note taker, like in college and everything else. Like I thrived off my notes. And so him telling me that, I was like, okay, like I can do that. Like my notes are going to be the best notes in this company. You know what I mean? Like if that's what they're going to look at and that's the data point that they have on me, I'm going to be the best. You know what I mean? Like I want to be the best at taking notes. And it took me a long time to understand what it is to write. Because like when you're first learning as an SDR, you're just so overwhelmed with being in that you're not listening for what you need to be listening for. So you get better over time because you start to like really listen for the things that are important to write down. And I'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide of how I kind of organize my thoughts after a call. But quick rapid fire bullet points here. If you're not talking, you're typing. And that's kind of what we were talking about earlier with being the energy. It's just like, you know, if you're not typing, just think, or if you're not talking, think about how hard it is to remember things when you're talking or you're presenting. And that's what you're helping your AE to do, as you're there as their right-hand man or woman to make sure that, you know, nothing's missed, right? And we have a ton of cool tools for that too. Nowadays there's Gong and things like that, to help with this, but, and Zoom. But, what I was talking about was pay attention to the themes and create buckets of information. I'll show you an example of that, but really, when I'm taking my notes, I think about the themes of the call. There's usually like an introduction where everyone's kind of like giving their roles and what they do and, you know, how they came to know about your product. Right. And so at that point, I think a lot of people don't, it's like, hey, if there's multiple people on the call, like who are these people? They might not be in the CRM yet. You know what I mean? Like, let's figure out who they are. Let's start, you know, like this is the beginning of creating that tree of knowledge of who does what and where do they all fit in the big puzzle piece of the organization. But then there's also like the middle pieces, right? Like usually you start talking about their needs, or you maybe run through like a BANT qualification. So it's like I'm already bucketing like BANT, you know what I mean? And I'm thinking about like, where does that fit? Because sometimes it doesn't happen perfectly, you know what I mean? Like sometimes you don't just run through, oh, so, you know, what's your budget? You know, who's involved? What's your timeline? You know what I mean? But those nuggets come out. It could be in the beginning, you know what I mean? Hey, you know, it could be in someone's introduction. It could be in the last 2 minutes of the call. But what it does is it helps for someone who's going to be reading this later to consume the information if you can keep the notes within themes, right? And so continue to apply that BANT and MEDIC framework. Like if you don't have a framework that your organization is using already, I highly suggest looking into like BANT or MEDIC in your qualification processes. As just something to have a baseline of like, what should I baseline be looking for, right? As I'm getting into a call, listening for the highlight dates, metrics, next steps, like those are all part of like MEDIC and BANT, but really being the one that's like listening for that, you know what I mean? Like, what was that date they said? What was that time they said to set up the demo? What was that time that we're supposed to be, you know, sending a calendar invitation, right? Because the last thing you want to do is have to ask after the call. I mean, that's when you're in the worst place, because it's like, you know, where do we end up? But it's also fine if you miss it, right? Sometimes that happens. But this is, I think, the most important part is think from every perspective. And this is where I think when you think about what I said earlier about how someone told me, hey, they look at your notes when you're looking to get promoted. And this is where I think this makes sense, because the way that you ingest the information and process it in your own mind and then put it into your CRM is how you're perceived as how you understand your product knowledge, how you understand the sales cycle, how you understand who's involved, how you understand who the stakeholders are, all those different areas. And also it's like, what does my solution engineer need to know, right? Like, let's help my AE to have that conversation and that transition and that handoff. And so like, whether that's meeting with your solutions engineer one time and just being like, hey, like, what are the things you like to listen to so I can start answering those questions ahead of time, or asking those questions, I'm sorry. And so, and what does your AE need to know to maybe get this approved by their manager, or whatever it may be. So think about all those different perspectives as you're putting together your notes, so that it's not just like, hey, I got what I need to get my opportunity or whatever it is. It's, did I get what I need to make this, viable to close for the business? You know what I mean? And everyone else who's involved, right? So I'll pause there for a quick second and let you guys ask any questions, or if not, we'll dive into kind of the example of what this looks like.
Yeah, for me, I just wanted to add some color. Like the notes part, there's just, like you said, so many benefits to it. Not only are you helping the AE out, but you're also like, these are the things people look for when you get promoted. But on top of that, like if you go above and beyond for your AE, like Marcos, like how many deals are you working at a time? Like 30 to 40 deals. You have so many things. You can, not to say that we can be their assistant, but if you go above and beyond during AE, and then you need your AE to have that trust and relationship. And when you do need that extra opportunity, it'll be much easier for him to throw you that bone when he does need it. And on top of that, I've used notes in the past to really showcase my AE. Like say Marcos was my AE and he's working 30, 40 deals. And I need 2 more opportunities to be accepted by the end of this week, because it's end of quarter. And I'm sure he probably doesn't even remember some of the deals that we've worked, or that isn't top of mind for him. By having excellent notes, you can directly show them, oh, look at this band. Like, this is an accepted opportunity. Like, there you go. So like, this is great. There's just so much more.
Yeah. And something to add more color here, the more notes, the more leverage, both parties, right? SDRs can potentially fight for an opportunity towards the end. But also like in AE, a lot of times, so like, I can tell you from my perspective, if you're not going to provide me notes, like I'm not going to get along with you pretty well, because like the AE, like our job is to close business, right? It's not to open up opportunities. And so if I get an SDR that gives me really good notes, like that takes at least an hour or 2 out of my day. Like I don't have to go out and research and figure everything out. And I could just basically, what I do as an AE, I basically copy and paste those into like a PowerPoint. I said, hey, this is what we know. This is all the research we've done. Isn't this amazing? And then I kind of give a shout out to my SDR, because like I want them to like feel excited, because like as an AE, you have to do that. And so I'm curious to see how you structure your notes. And I think you have an example for us.
I sure do. So it's a lot to take in at first. But this is an example of one 30-minute call. This is one 30-minute call, right? And so as you can see, and I've actually kind of evolved from this example, I would say, in terms of like really putting these into like a timeline of how to consume from top to bottom, right? Like even looking at this, it's a little much. But what you can see, what I do here is I create those buckets, like I was saying, right? So you have like all of your basic like BANT covered, right? But I add in other things, like what are the drivers? Like what are the specific things they talked about as it pertained to that data lake that they had a project for, you know what I mean? So like I highlight that, or I'll highlight questions where it's like, what was that question they asked that was like that dagger that no one really knew how to answer that well, so that it's highlighted so that when Marcos goes back in on the next call, we know we have that one answered, you know what I mean? And I'm also putting in how we answered it initially too, so that if there's any clarification that needs to happen, we know what we said to them in the last call. We know how to talk about it in the next call. But then the most important thing always is next steps, right? Like really dialing in on like having those next steps at the very end. So, it's all highlighted, everything's taken care of. We know exactly what we're all doing, and when, right? And so this is a good basic example of turning a 30-minute call into 2 pages worth of notes, right? But you can even do this better than what you're saying here. You can add in so much more: roles and titles, exactly who's involved, who expects what, who is exactly sending the next steps, who's owning the Zoom call for the next call. Is it their team or is it our team? Like there's such a level of granularity you can get down to that it really, at the end of the day, takes 2 minutes to just organize your thoughts. And like what this looks like is the final product. When I leave the call, it does not look like this. When I leave the call, it is, and I wish I would have provided an example of what that looked like, because it would have been cool to see like what my original notes were and then how I bucketed them into this, because I'm just typing as I listen and it's going so fast, and none of these buckets, like I can't, I'd have to be robotic to be able to do this live, right? But I take that 5 or 10 minutes after the call to really dial everything into these buckets or themes so that it's consumable for whoever it is that's going to look at it later on, whether it's me, my AE, my SE, my AE's manager, my channel alliances manager, whoever it is that might be involved, so they can just quickly consume it and we're moving. And that's how you start to progress opportunities quickly. You know what I mean? There's no questions. They don't need to set up a call with me to ask me questions. Everything's there. Everything's on the opportunity, right? And so that's really how I do my note taking for the most part.
I just want to say, every SDR that's listening, like, you have to have these notes. I mean, this will get you promoted. That's why you're team lead. That's why you're president's club. But man, like every AE would die to have you as an SDR. That's what I can say. But just looking at these real quick, some highlights that I wanted to add. So like authority, like just being honest and saying like, hey, like Mary, not the decision maker, like totally cool and fine. But I thought like the honesty that you had when you put in parentheses, hey, not like when we go to like the data lake area, which is right under requirements, it says, not sure if I caught this right. Like it's okay as an SDR if you don't know something, especially as you're starting, like you don't have to know everything. It's going to be virtually impossible to know everything. So just write things down. But I've actually never done like, not sure if I caught this right. But hey, like the more information, the better. So that's like one thing I wanted to highlight. And then the other one, you reached upon this, which was like a question, right? So say, for example, there's a question that maybe your AE didn't know, or, maybe you didn't know, but you just actually just write down that whole question, referring to like where it says like data catalog. I use data catalog with Azure. It's like question, right? So like, I mean, dude, yes. That's all I can say. I'm just like, brings a smile to my face because it's amazing.
Yeah, that is going back to what you said first, not sure if I caught this right part is super important, because usually it's just like some kind of industry jargon or something that you're not like getting yet, but you'll get there eventually. But at least it helps you, if you're my AE, to go Google, or like maybe oh, this is what he's talking about. Like I get it. I have these calls every day, right? But then the questions part is something that I think is very unique to what I do specifically, because I know that that's something that you're listening to what they're actually telling you. You know what I mean? That like when they're talking, it's cool to hear about the project and all the other things, but when they're asking questions, that's what's really on the top of their mind, right? When you're talking to a prospect, like that's the most important piece, is the questions that they're asking. And so I don't think SDRs really take those questions enough and put them onto that. Your follow-up stronger, your next call stronger, the close is a lot stronger, because you're hitting on all those points that they brought to you at the very beginning when they had that real desire and need to get together with your team. You know what I mean? So I can't agree with you enough. So we'll jump into kind of the last part here on the BD energy, is opportunity maintenance. If you can join every call, I think it's important. I know a lot of organizations won't have SDRs take that next call, which, is arguably, that helps the SDR to free up more time and have time to make more calls and things along those lines, which is fine. But if you have the opportunity, and at Talend, we for sure have the opportunity to take every call. And that's something that I've had certain AEs shy away from, like we had the initial calls and then they kind of stopped inviting me, right? And then I've had certain AEs that invite me to everything. I mean, like down to like final pricing calls at the very end. And again, I might not be saying anything, but I'm still taking notes. I'm still learning. This is my chance to see what deeper into the sales cycle looks like. So if I'm looking to get promoted, right, how are you going to be able to talk about that in an interview if you've never been through it, right? And it helps to just continue that relationship and that partnership so that they build that trust with you to say, okay, like Derek's valuable to me in these calls. You know what I mean? Derek's not just sitting there in the dark on the sidelines, not bringing value. Like I want Derek in my call because he's going to catch things that I didn't hear, or I'm going to be able to talk to him after the call and he might pick up on something that I didn't think about in a certain way or whatever it may be. So I just highly encourage everyone to join every call, because then you're also going to be helping to create that opportunity and make it even stronger, and maybe go back and fill in some of those blanks that you didn't get in those initial calls where you were involved, right? And then so the next tip here is be the master of next steps. I touched on that earlier, so I won't go too deep into it, but just really listening to what the next steps are and how you can progress the opportunity helps to keep the momentum going. So it's really like going back, making sure that the next steps were properly updated in your opportunity on Salesforce, whatever CRM you're using, so that it's not just all on your AE when you're juggling 30 or 40 different opportunities to know like what it is that he or she needs to do, right? So, and then like, again, updating those opportunities often, go back in and continue to add in. If you hear in a second or third call more BANT information, you know what I mean? Add that in, because you might not be thinking about that anymore because it's already qualified, right? But if you can be that energy to bring that back into the opportunity where normally you might not have, you're just going to help to show more data around why this is a viable opportunity, right? And get it progressed forward, and it helps your SDR or your AE, right? And so that all ties into understanding what is needed to progress the opportunity, right? And so those are that criteria that we talked about earlier, is like carry that into your calls, right? Like, what it is that you need to have to get your opportunity, but you also need to know what your AE needs to have to, get this discount approved by their manager, or like whatever it may be, right? So you're continuing to add value all the way through the sales cycle, and that just helps to build your rapport with your AE, and it also helps to have your opportunities be more likely to close, right? Which ultimately means more money for everybody. So it's definitely it's a win-win for everyone, but that kind of is the full circle of, master those next steps. It's all about just progressing things and allowing your AE to focus on those 30 or 40 opportunities that they're working on, and you be the energy around those 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 that you're super hyper focused on, right?
Yeah. And so, it seems like, there's a reason why you're crushing it, obviously. I've been writing down like key themes throughout, and I would say first started off with trust, and then it became like energy, right? And then notes, right? So like trust, energy, notes. It could be, other, types of wording, but it seems like you just have to work with your AE to be like that team, right? And especially this opportunity maintenance. I'd even do this as an SDR. If I had an SDR that was, updating opportunities, then like, hell yeah, that'd be awesome. It just makes the AE's life so much easier, and then they're able to help you. So I'm like curious, and, as far as like wrapping this up, as far as like, any like tips that you want to leave the audience with, etc.
Yeah. So rapid fire tips, perfect transition. Here's a couple tips that, again, with the help of Jim Oyen, big shout out to Jim. He went out and interviewed a couple of the top performing SDRs at Talend. So here's just some quick rapid fire tips. If you guys want to pick apart some of these, go ahead and ask me some questions on it. But for me personally, it's set the weekly cadence. It's all things we talked about. Practice pitching with each other, right? I think that's super huge. Help with the sales tools. So like a lot of AEs have a hard time wrapping their hands around all the tools that we use. So that's super key. Get them started on outreach, get them started with Sales Navigator, like anything that they might not be using to the fullest extent, that we're pros at using on a day-to-day basis. It just helps to have someone else doing that with you, right? And then again, taking diligent notes, of course. And something that I think is important is asking to join partner conversations. So if you're working with partners, I think a lot of the times AEs do that in a silo. And that's something that a lot of my successful AEs, they brought me into those. So I'm hearing the tribal knowledge about what's going on in different accounts through partners, right? So if you have the opportunity to have a strong partner network, make sure you're asking your AE to get involved in those conversations so that you can get some insight into what's going on in those accounts.
No, I was just going to say, I was going to pick apart like Natalie and I think it's SEL. Yeah, but just briefly, like talking, or just sharing a little bit insight there. I thought the idea of constant communication, I feel like anywhere in sales, like if you're not being communicative, then it leads to like, it's like a relationship, right? Like it's just going to lead to a lot of people not being transparent with each other, which is bad. But then I love this idea of kind of doing like a close loss opportunity or like help dead or dying opportunities. Like for an SDR perspective, like you should always be revisiting those every quarter, right? Trying to at least, hey, like, are you open to a re-conversation or, reintroduction, et cetera. And so, I think these are great tips for sure.
No, yeah, 100%. And just on your point about helping on dead and dying opportunities, it's like, that's some of your lowest hanging fruit as an SDR. Sometimes it isn't that they went with a competitor. Sometimes things happen. Sometimes, it just wasn't the right timing or there wasn't a perfect fit for the project that they had on hand, but you invested a lot of time, right, in educating them about what you do. So that can go a long way for re-engaging, right? So that you can make sure that, these people already know who you are. You don't have to go through the pitch again. You don't have to go through all those other things that you might have to with a brand new account, right? And there's always opportunity within different business lines and things along those lines. You can use those names, use that momentum to help you get some more opportunities going.
We're going to put you on the hot seat. The first question, typical sales question, but everyone has a different answer. Do you love to win or do you hate to lose?
Do I love to win or do I hate to lose? So I have like an age-old saying for this. And it goes something, I might butcher this a little bit, but it goes something along the lines of, if I'm not winning, I'm learning.
Okay. I love it.
So I love winning. Obviously, I think we all do. We all have some kind of competitive nature in sales for the most part. But to be honest, I'm not that competitive of a person. Like I'm actually very different in that sense. I'm very much more of like a team builder and everyone wins together type of person. So I do still love winning. But I don't really care about being in first as long as I have put in my effort and I've had a lot of learning experiences along that road. If I take second, but next year I can come back and take first, and the next year after that I can take first again, and the next year after that I can take first again because I learned from what I didn't do right the first time, I find that to be a lot more valuable than winning. And so it really is something that I stand true to is, if you're not winning, you're learning 100%. And those learning experiences are what's going to make you a winner in the long term. So that's my take on that question.
So do you love to win?
So I love to win. I love to win, I guess, at the end of the day. But,
I love it.
But I hate losing too, man. It's the worst. It really is.
No, it just goes to show how lucky your SDRs are to have you as like their SDR team lead, just because your goal there is to really build them up, help like build a great community and make them better. And you've just had so much, like throughout this whole episode, you've had like so many learnings, etc. I'm curious to hear, what are your kind of favorite thought leaders in sales that have brought you here, inspired you, etc.?
A lot. And there's people that are thought leaders, and there's people in sales specifically, and there's people that aren't. I learn a lot through, I'll start with the people that aren't. I learn a lot through sports. So I would say like I'm a very big sports guy. And I look up to the Michael Jordans of the world and the people that the Kobe Bryants of the world that, there's like a really good Kobe Bryant article about 6 a.m. And it's like, waking up early in the morning, and like, there's little fundamental things that I think that like athletes have, that like sales, we're almost like the athletes of the company. You know what I mean? Like, we're very much like in the same kind of pressure of, you have metrics that you're looking to attain, and you're trying to win President's Club awards, and it's all rewards based, right? So that's really who I love to listen to, like stories, even business people that are related to sports, like Phil Knight's story, like the Shoe Dog. Like I read that before. But when it comes to sales, like absolutely my favorite person in the world is Beck Holland. And I've heard her talked about a lot in other episodes on SDR Life, but honestly, like, she deserves a huge shout out, because it's the same reason why this podcast is so special, because it provides examples of what to actually use practically in your day-to-day role. And I think that's what Beck Holland does, right? And that's something that you don't get from reading like a Challenger sale. Like, you get concepts and ideas, but you don't get like day-to-day practical knowledge about what I can go do when I wake up tomorrow and put into practice. You know what I mean? And so her like Flip the Script kind of series, and her YouTube channel, and just following her on LinkedIn is huge to get, like, what does the successful sequence look like? Like, what kind of messaging do I need to have? Like, how do I personalize that scale? Like, all those things are super, super key. And so like, she's like by far my favorite. I mean, like 100%.
Yeah,
shout out to Beck Holland. She's awesome.
Yeah. Shout out to Beck. We have to get her on the show. We'll work it together.
You have to.
She's a giant in the industry. But you're going to be the next Beck Holland too, man. I mean, you're delivering like these winning insights. Don't sell yourself short there. And if I could just say everything, just to wrap it up, like, any SDR out there that is looking to have a great relationship, reach out to Derek. How can they follow you? Is that on LinkedIn? What's the best way?
LinkedIn all the way. I'm LinkedIn/Derek Antti. It's super easy to find. If you reach out to me, I'll accept you for sure. And I tell people this all the time, like, reach out to me. Seriously, if you ask, I will help you. 100%. If you ask, I will help you. If you don't ask, I can't help you. But everyone that knows me knows that I'm a guy that'll take an hour or 30 minutes or whatever it may be to have a conversation with someone and try to help out in any way that I possibly can, whether it's at Talend internally, or you're just getting started in your SDR role, or you have no idea what an SDR even does. Whatever it may be, I'm happy to help out and tell my story and share my findings and all that good stuff.
Derek, we need more of Derek's in this world. Thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely a small world, but we're glad we have you on Team SDR Life. People are going to reach out to you. Yep. I'm super pumped. And just like from the bottom of our hearts, like, we just want to thank you, because like what you delivered today was just so valuable. If I had this when I started, I mean, I think I would have had maybe 20 more opportunities accepted. But like, you're amazing, man. And I appreciate your time.
No, yeah. Thank you guys, and continue to grow this community. I think it's really important what you guys are doing, just for the community as a whole. I'm super passionate about it. You guys are super passionate about it, and it's going to help it grow. Right. So, continue feeding the good knowledge to everybody out there. And I'm really excited to see kind of how this thing comes to fruition. And I'm really excited that, we're just growing the community together. So thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the SDR Live podcast. If you like this episode, please share, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you tune in next week, and have a fantastic week.